This week we have Corinne Warren, who lives in Monument, Colorado. She's qualified for PBP 3 times and has 1 DNS, 1 DNF, and 1 completed PBP. In both 2019 and 2023, her intention was to attempt a Charly Miller time of 56 hours and 40 minutes. She has also completed a number of other Grand Randonnees, including the Cascade 1200, the Golden Rush 1200, and London Edinburg London. Finally, Corinne is also the editor of American Randonneur, which is a magazine sent out quarterly to all RUSA members. Corinne, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it, okay?
Sure.
A brief aside, tell me about American Randonneur and your role as editor.
Okay. So AR, that's what we refer
cool.
to
What the
as
cool people call it, okay.
So that is the publication that we put together at headquarters to share stories amongst all of the AR members. It started back, I think, in 1998, and it was more like a newsletter form. And back then, I went back and looked at some of the old issues. I'd say like half the material was all PvP related. But it's evolved since then, and like I said, it's a chance for people to share their stories about. It doesn't have to even be RUSA events. It doesn't have to be randonneering. We also have some other long distance stories in there, and then also advice. And I'm really trying to develop that side of it because I think it's a valuable resource. We have a couple of people who are specialists in their fields. We've had the nuts, bolts, and gear column, which has kind of run its course, but now Sarah Rice, the Chicago RBA, she's a doctor of physical therapy. She's penned a number of columns on health issues that I think are really great. So it's I love doing it. If it were a full-time paid position, it would be my dream job. But it's a huge time suck. I recognize, every volunteer position, especially the RBAs, the board members, it takes a lot of time. But that's the big limitation is the time that it takes.
Yeah. Well, Corinne, I read it every quarter, so thank you so much for volunteering and editing. It's an excellent magazine. It really is. Great photos, great articles, and thank you. Okay, great. Okay, back to my normal questions. What does PBP mean to you?
PBP is this kind of mythical, larger than life, holy grail of long distance cycling. And I've always kind of regarded it with reverence.
Yes.
So yeah, just the apex of the sport.
Cool. How did it feel at the finish line? So that third attempt, right? How did it feel? 2023.
With just one word, relieved. I was relieved to get the monkey off my back after 8 years.
Okay. Let's get back to the start. Tell me about your background in cycling, maybe even your earliest memory on a bike.
Oh, my earliest memory, I think I was 6, and I got a pink and purple bike for my birthday.
Okay.
And I lived in New Jersey at the time. We lived at the end of a cul-de-sac. And I remember riding the bike around and around and around and around until I would get lower and lower until I hit the pedal and crashed.
Okay.
And that's actually a little bit of foreshadowing.
Okay, very good. Okay.
For this session. But funny. Then in high school, I was out of district, so I bike commuted to school. And then I went to UC Davis in California.
Okay. Yes.
And, used my bike then. And when I was at Davis, I heard about the Davis double century. And I thought that was just insanity. Couldn't wrap my head around the idea of riding 200 miles. But I met my husband at Davis, and he was a bike racer. And so I bought a bike with my graduation money. And I rode a little bit then, but then once I graduated, I was done for a while.
That's so cool. I'm interested actually. So you grew up in New Jersey and then went to college in Davis. You went from
So I was born on the East Coast and essentially raised on the West Coast.
Okay.
We moved when I was 7, and I was the oldest of 5.
Okay.
So yeah, I consider, well, Colorado's my home now, but I spent from age 7 to essentially 33 in
Yeah.
California.
And was that in northern or southern or?
North in the Bay Area.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. Okay.
San
I was,
Jose, Morgan Hill.
yeah, I was just going to ask you, like, is there kind of a culture shock when you go to Davis? But obviously there wasn't a huge culture shock because you were somewhat local. Is that right?
Right, right.
Okay. And is it really kind of the biking mecca that people talk about, especially back then when you went to college?
I thought so.
Yeah.
Bike lanes, and when I was going there, there were more bikes in Davis than there were people.
Okay.
So, and then, like I said,
That's good.
my um, my now husband, then boyfriend, our first date, um, I took him. It was to an evening with Greg LeMond after Greg had won one of the tours. Yeah,
Oh,
so
that's hilarious. Wow. So it wasn't very intimate then. It sounds like there was another person there as well, Greg LeMond. That's amazing. That's so cool. Great. Tell me, why do you ride in general?
cycling is such an important part of my life. It is my mental health. It's my physical health. It is my entire social life.
Okay.
So if I ever get to the point where I can't ride, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And it's also it's my fun. I have a hip issue, and I've been told you can ride a bike, but that's about it. I even have trouble hiking.
Okay.
So cycling fills so many needs for me. And the other thing is that when I swing my leg over the top tube, I feel a rush of confidence because I feel
That's
like on a
cool.
bike, I know what I'm doing.
That's great. That's cool. Um, so I know then, so after college, I think I read you sent me some details. You did your first 100K after very little preparation, I think just immediately after college. Is that correct?
Um, no, it was so we had moved to Colorado. Our kids were 2 and 4, and they were in elementary school when, yeah, I heard about this ride called Elephant Rock.
Yeah.
And I told my sister and they had a century, a metric century, and a 50 mile. And I told one of my sisters, I'm like, yeah, I think we should try this. And so yeah, so we trained for 3 weeks, and we worked our way up to 30 miles.
Wow.
And then on
Yeah.
the day of, actually, I'm a really bad sister because
Okay.
I dropped my sister on the first hill and I
Nice.
didn't look back. And I got to the point where the 50-mile people were supposed to turn to the west, and the metric century people kept going straight. And I said, you know what? Actually, I felt really good. And I surprised myself, like riding with all these people. I'm like, I think I'm going to try the metric. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, so I went and I did the metric century and discovered I'm not bad at cycling.
How's your sister? She's still riding?
She rides indoors,
Okay.
just on a trainer. Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Like many women, she does not feel safe on the roads. So,
Oh,
yeah.
completely. Yeah. So I think also in that bio detail you sent me, you were looking at the Rocky Mountain Cycling Club and their PBP, and you're really trying to get your head around it. It took quite a while to
Yes.
even understand what it was. So tell
Yes.
me about that.
So the year after I did that metric century, I rode a full century. And I was on my brother's 1986 100% aluminum Guerciotti racing bike.
Nice. Nice.
So I was out on the roads, and I ran into a guy, and he was really interested in my bike. I told him I just finished my first century. He said, wow. He said, if you can do 100 miles on that bike, I'd like to see what you can do on a bike that fits you. And he's
Wow.
the one that asked me if I'd ever heard of PBP. So, I told him I hadn't. I went home, I looked it up, and that's where I found RMCC
Wow.
and Rocky Mountain Cycling Club, for those who don't know.
Yep.
And they had a bunch of rides. So they had brevets, but they also had these Triple Crown rides, which interested me more because the Triple Crown rides, which is a series of double centuries, just like the California series, they're up in the
Yeah.
mountains. And but I looked, I was like, Denver to Aspen, my family always said, oh, it's too far to drive to Aspen. Here's a
Yeah.
bike ride. So it took me a long time, actually 8 years.
Wow.
I would look
Yeah.
at those pages I read all the stories and still just, it didn't make sense to me.
I
Uh,
know.
but fine, yeah, I had a couple bad years in between where I was caring for my brother who died of cancer, and then the following year my father, and it kind of wiped out those two cycling seasons for me.
Yeah.
So the year after that, I said, it's time to it's time to try this. And I had in the back of my mind, like, I wanted to try PBP and I knew it was coming up in 2015, but I didn't
Yeah.
want that to be my first huge ride if I was going to do it. So I wanted to do something,
Yeah.
beforehand. So this was 2012, and I wanted to do the 300K, the Black Forest 300K, but we had a family commitment that weekend that I could not skip. So I looked, there was another one the next weekend, and that one had 17,000 feet of climbing. But
Yeah.
that didn't mean anything to me. I didn't
Okay. Yeah.
understand.
Just numbers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. It meant nothing. So I showed up at the start and I brought my check. You didn't have to be a RUSA member back then
Yeah.
to ride a brevet. And there were only three guys, and the ride leader actually, Ryan Franz, he had just done a Charly Miller the year
Oh, wow.
before.
Yeah.
But anyway, he looked at me. He's like, "This is your first ride," and he said, "Yeah, this might be one of the most difficult rides, 300 Ks in North America." And I said, "Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. I don't know easy from hard."
Yeah.
So uh, I did the ride, and it was the worst weather I had ever ridden a bike in.
Wow.
We started in rain. It snowed on us. It hailed on us, and I did not have the gear. I had,
Yeah.
leg warmers, and I had a windbreaker and a rain jacket, but nothing for warmth. Anyway,
Amazing.
I did survive, thanks
Can
to
I?
John
Yeah.
Flanagan,
Okay.
one
Can I,
of the
so they all-
experienced randonneurs. Yeah.
yeah. So they all stayed with you? Is that through the whole thing?
No,
All
no,
the
no, no, no.
Okay.
No,
No.
I was out the back. So it starts with a like 2,000 foot climb, and
Of course it does. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then I was third. But then once we came to the downhill, I dropped to the back,
Okay.
and then John had a series of four flat tires throughout the day.
Okay.
So for flat tire number four, he actually flagged down a car, sent it back to me, and these two women said, "John, up there, he would like to have your spare tire." And so I gave it to them. And it was funny because they said, "I can't believe he left you alone." And I said, "I
Yeah.
only just met him this morning. It's fine." But when we finished that ride together, he said,
Yeah.
if you can do this 300K, you can do a
Amazing.
400K. It's really not going
Yeah.
to take you much longer. So
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I did a 400K. And then I said, I'm done.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I still have time before 2015, but this is good for 1 year. And so
Yeah.
then the next year, 2013, I tore the meniscus in my knee, bump skiing.
Oh. Okay.
And the doctor said, you need surgery. I said, no. I was a 4,000 mile a year rider at that point. That year I rode 2,000 miles, and I
Yeah.
did exactly 1 century. And so then I'm like, I admitted, okay, fine, I need surgery. So I got the surgery in November, and then the next week I signed up for my first 1,200K.
Amazing.
And I said, I'll decide later if it's a bad idea or a good idea. But I knew the next year was 2014, PBP was 2015. I wanted to have that experience underneath my belt.
Cool. And
So
that 1200K, which one was that?
it was high country.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
in Colorado, and that was an adventure.
Okay.
Yeah, there was some really bad weather that I never would have ridden in had I not been doing an event. But
Yes. Yeah.
I met John Mankin, who is just, he's been doing randonneuring. He's got a number in the 1,000s. I met him on that ride, and I stuck to him like glue.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah.
And so that was 2014. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then, and that was your only Well, it was quite a long distance ride. But did you have any other long events before PBP?
So the next year I rode my first SR series.
Okay, all right, great.
And I I signed up for PBP, but I had been having troubles. I was having hip pain, and
Okay,
I I I still rode all the qualifying rides despite the hip pain, to just try to compact that situation. I saw 13 different healthcare providers,
wow,
and
wow,
my insurance company would not approve an MRI, but nobody
yeah.
even recommended getting an X-ray. So I also had hernia surgery, thinking that that was going to fix my hip pain. And a couple weeks after that, I was in tears. Uh, I hurt so much. Talking to my hernia surgeon, he was able to get my insurance company to relent and get me an MRI. And as soon as they took it, they're like, no wonder you're in pain. So I had bone spurs all on the heads of my femur,
Oh,
both
wow.
femurs that had cut the cartilage in my hips to shreds.
Ugh.
So I was actually in the office of an anesthesiologist, and he looked at me. He said, this was 3 weeks before PVP. He said, you're not going to Paris. And I realized he was right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in way too much pain to go
Okay.
do any big bike ride. So the
Yeah.
thing I remember from 2015 is that all the RMCC riders, they're over in France and they're having dinner together. Someone took a phone and typed a message to me and they passed it around the table and everybody texted me and I was
Oh,
sitting at home in front of my computer bawling my head off
oh
because I
God.
felt so left out, but also
Yes.
so
Yeah.
lucky that they were over there and they were still thinking of me.
Yeah. Such a nice story. So then, 2019, you did
Mhm.
quite a bit of riding up until then, and
Yes.
you were determined you were going to show PBP who was boss when you got there in 2019.
Well, I kept, I did an SR series every year and I did the other 1200s and
Yeah.
um, I did pretty well. I was usually the first woman who wasn't on a tandem to finish
Yeah.
those rides. And then in 2018, I went out to California. I did the California Triple Crown, the stage race, and I
Yeah.
knew I could podium, but I didn't expect to win.
Wow. Wow.
So that was a confidence booster. When 2019 rolled around, I went down, and somebody had said by this point, oh wow, you should really try to Charly Miller. There's only two people that have ever done it, and Susan Notarangelo and Melinda Lyon. I went down to Arizona to ride two of my qualifiers, and I met Susan. And after she saw my 300K, she's like, "Oh yeah, you can do it." So then
Great.
that's more pressure, but also more
Yeah.
inspiration. And I kind of finished my training off with another Colorado Triple Crown, and that year it just worked out. Like I had three third places. It was enough to win the series, and no woman had won before.
That's
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and so I went into 2019. I had confidence.
Completely. Completely.
I had confidence, and uh, we when we got to the start, I actually wasn't even nervous. I'm like, I've got
Okay.
this.
Yes.
Uh,
And
yeah,
can I ask, Corinne, like the Charlie Miller, it's really all about minimizing stuff off the bike and just
yep,
keep going, right?
yep.
Had you read a lot about it? Had you talked to a lot of people? Like, what was your strategy for that first Charlie Miller attempt?
So yes, I had read about it. I had talked to people, Ryan Franz, Billy Edwards. Uh, right before going to France, I had organized a night 200K with two Charlie Miller riders, one other rider, and myself. So I, tried to glean all the information that I could. On Cascade, I met Brian Kilgore, and I asked him for a time schedule, and I took that and adapted it to just a little bit for me, knowing my strengths
Yeah.
and weaknesses. Um, because of the Triple Crown and my mentor, Mark Lowe, he had beat into my head that you have to minimize your off the bike time. And so
Yeah.
I actually had gotten pretty efficient by that point. I think one of my California Triple Crowns, I had less than a half hour off the
Wow.
bike.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So yeah, and while I was fast, I'm not like super fast. So I realized that that was going to be important. And then this is very key for 2019. I was very, very fortunate to have somebody volunteer to be my support. My friend George from Switzerland, he and
Yeah.
his dad drove down in their
Amazing.
VW California van, which is awesome, and they don't sell it in this country.
Okay.
George did such an amazing job being my support. Like I've
Yeah.
supported a lot of
Yeah.
rides.
Can I ask how does support work on PBP?
Uh, well, you can't ride the course, so they send out like a zip file of information, and I have to say, George printed out he had a playbook. It was like this thick with directions and the maps of the controls and everything. Like
Yeah.
he was so much more prepared than I could
Yes.
be.
Yeah.
I never even had to look. Every time I came into, we didn't meet at every control, but every time I came into a control, he was there.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having somebody who's fluent in French, I think that helps.
Yeah.
Um,
And would
but
he, so the only thing he couldn't do was get your card stamped, but everything else he'd get you
so
fed, etc.
yes, and
Okay.
that for me actually is of crucial importance. So I have celiac, I'm gluten free, and France is the land of bread.
Okay. I noticed. Yeah.
So yeah, I can't have the jamon et fromage sandwiches. I can't eat the pain au chocolat. I can't have baguettes, crepes. I can only have them if they're
Yeah.
buckwheat. So yeah, so having George have food for me was really important. Uh, he was magic.
Okay.
He was
That's great.
always, and we didn't even have a flag. He was just there, and I don't. He went above and beyond my greatest expectations. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's just he's Swiss.
Okay. Okay. That's funny.
Yeah, he was awesome, and he also he would go into the towns, and I had food for me that was had a lot of sugar in it, and
Yeah.
I got sick of it really quickly. And he's like, "Oh, I found this porridge for you. Oh, I found some gluten free pasta and some sauce."
Amazing.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds great," because I'm sick of
That's
my
so cool.
food. Yeah,
So,
he did.
so, yeah. So then, at what point you started making great time? You were probably in the A or B group. Is that right?
So
Were you in?
I was in the
Yeah.
B group, and I
Okay.
was with my friends Mark, my
Yeah.
mentor, and Billy, who had done a Charly Miller before. And again, at the start, I was confident. I chatted up one of the German riders, um, and but I was going to be riding alone. Mark and Billy are both much, much stronger.
Yeah.
My plan had been to find somebody to ride with.
Yeah. Okay.
So comfortable, confident, and we rolled out when the gun went off, and everything was fine. But then we hit the tarmac, and you've heard these stories.
Yes.
As soon
Yeah.
as we hit pavement, all hell broke loose, and the German guy I'd been talking to, he shot off like a bullet, and the
Yeah.
whole thing we just probably doubled our speed, and we're tearing down the road, which
Yeah.
I was actually prepared for, so it didn't take me off guard, but experiencing it was like, wow, I'd never been riding
Yeah.
that fast with you know scores of people.
Yeah.
So it was crazy. And this is like the most important part of 2019. For the first 20K, it was awesome. I was having fun. I figured that I could stay with Mark and Billy for the first 200 to 300 kilometers, and that would give me a good start. But at 20 kilometers, we are coming out of the forest and we're going into a field. And so you don't expect that there would be road furniture there.
Oh,
But
yeah.
there was a median, and the gentleman who was right immediately to the left of Billy, hit it. The next thing I see, Billy is flying over his handlebars. The guy right in front of me, I don't know how he ended up, but he like veered into Billy and crashed. I was very fortunate. I was unable to unclip and I hit the guy's back tire, but I remained standing. Four men behind me went down. So
Jeez.
it was this 7-man pileup. And
Wow.
all I remember is going and picking up people's water bottles and trying to get them back to them. If Billy had not been able to get up, my ride would have ended right there. I wouldn't have
Yeah.
continued. But he did get up. He was bleeding. He was checking out his bike and swearing. I'm not sure why, what the trigger was, but I got back on my bike and continued down the road. But I was going, oh my God,
Oh
oh
my
my God.
God. Yes.
And I have to say that for me, that was the point where I went from total confidence and happy and whatever to I started this downward spiral.
Yeah, no, understandable completely. And like you still had, 1,180 kilometers left, and that
Right.
happened. And did you lose the fast group immediately or
Oh,
not?
like this. I mean,
Gone. Yeah.
I couldn't get back with anybody. And like 2 minutes later, Billy comes tearing by me. No way could I put out the watts he did. And one
Yeah.
by one, the other men came in. You can hear like the bikes. There was bike damage. People were bleeding. But even so, I wasn't able to reconnect with any of them.
Okay.
So, and it, like a half an hour later, then my nose started running, which I didn't think anything of at the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that was the beginning of the end for me in
So
2019.
yeah, like I think I saw here, you still made it to Brest in very good time, right? Like
That's
really
what
good
everybody
time.
tells me.
Yeah, that's I think some maybe 26.5 hours. That's what I see at least.
Yeah,
Um,
that was actually probably at least an hour and a half off the plan,
yeah.
the schedule. But and I know I didn't know what happened to Billy, but I knew from George because were sharing his support. I knew that Mark was about 2 hours ahead of me.
Okay.
So I get to Brest and I run into Dan Driscoll and Dan Colvin. And they had started, I think, in the E group, so 45 minutes behind me. They were also trying to Charly Miller. And I told them my tale of woe. And Dan Driscoll said, you know what, Corinne? He's like, I don't know if you're going to make it, but we're going to try and help you. He's like, so
Wow.
we're going to meet you back at Carhay. And he's like, and then, we'll ride together and we're all going for the same thing. And we might not make it. But anyway, Dan
Yeah.
inspired me. And he said, but girl, you need to drop us because you have to go back and
Okay.
get ready.
Yeah.
So, and this is the one good part, my one funny story. So I did. I must have had a tailwind because I started riding and I was passing pace lines.
Wow.
At
Wow.
one point, a Swedish guy, he jumped on my wheel. He said, "Can you pull me back to my team?" I said, "Sure." So cruise past, and he's like, "Thank you, sure."
Amazing.
Anyway, so I'm
Wow.
riding, and I go past these two men, and they start yelling at me, and I thought that they were Italian, and I thought that they were yelling "Donna, Donna," but um, it turns out that they were yelling Fiona, Fiona. And the one of them came after me. He came up to me. He's like, Fiona, can I have your autograph? And I'm like, I said, I'm just an American chick. They thought I was Fiona Kolbinger, who had just
Okay.
won the Transcontinental because
That's
of the way I was
hilarious.
riding.
The speed. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah.
Wow.
And Jose,
Yeah.
he didn't have very much English. I have only a few words of Spanish. So we tried to communicate. I was like so happy to, like connect with somebody because I hadn't to that point.
Yeah.
Um, and we stopped and we took pictures of each other's plate so that we could
Okay.
connect later on.
Okay.
And
Good.
yeah, so that was my high point. I'm like, yay, I met somebody.
That's nice.
So
Okay.
actually, that helped to, you know, perk me up. But randonneering, you're up 1 minute and down the next.
Completely. Yeah.
It was getting on towards night, so at some point I stopped. I put on the little bit of cold weather gear I had, my reflective gear. And Billy had said one of the most difficult things for him was at nighttime when you have the cars coming at you, the lights in your eyes. And so it was dark and the lights were really annoying me. And anyway, this is the point where I got lost.
Okay.
And to be honest, so I'm not sure what happened. I don't know whether I missed a turn or I took a turn I wasn't supposed to or what I did. But by the time I figured out, okay, this is not right.
Yes.
And I actually stopped and I talked to a shop owner, and she had some English. I just asked for directions to get back to Carhay, and I was really cold by then, and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, nothing's going right, and you can go up really quick, and you can also fall down in a dark pit of despair really quickly. And I
Yeah.
was not happy. I knew that if I got back to Carhay, I had I had leg warmers, I had a wool jersey, I had everything I needed to be warm, and then I would try and figure out what I was supposed to do. But I couldn't figure out from my Wahoo. I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to be. Yeah.
So hard. Yeah.
So anyway, I get back to Carhay, and George says to me, "Corinne, did you see Mark?" I said, "See Mark? I thought he was 2 hours in front of me." He's like, "No." He's like, "He called me. He can't pedal anymore." So he had a bad knee at the time, but it was his other knee that
Oh
was
my
giving him
God.
trouble, and he couldn't pedal. He came in 5 minutes after me, and I took one look at him, and that was the last straw. I said, "I'm not leaving you," and he
Yeah.
could not go on. So we quit. We turned in our cards together, and that
Yeah.
was the end of my 2019 PBP. And very importantly, I had gone into it saying Charly Miller or bust,
Okay.
and I busted.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get you.
So that was the end.
And when you DNF'd, this is always interesting to me as someone who's DNF'd lots of things in my life, basically. Um, were you kind of relieved, but then sad later, or like what were your emotions, short term, long term?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Short term, I was relieved because, like I said, I had really fallen into a pit of despair, and I had never just quit
Yeah.
before. So yes, and then the next morning I was a little. So we just all went to sleep, because Mark and I had gone without sleep. So we went to sleep, and in the morning we woke up, and he had gone in to use the restroom, and he came back. He said, "Oh, I saw Mateo, one of our friends and riders at RMCC." So I went in to see him, and talking to him, he was having the experience that I had hoped for myself. He had met somebody from a different country, and the two of
Yeah.
them hit it off, and they were working together and having a great time. And I'm like, that's what I really had expected and had hoped,
Yeah.
but it didn't work out. And so, but that wistfulness only lasted a short period of time because I was like, you know what? I came to do something and I failed, and so I'm okay. And even writing my Strava post, like I changed it a couple times. Like sometimes I was like, no, I'm fine. Other times I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what I just did.
Yeah.
Like I DNF'd PvP, and yet that remains the one like big ride. I've never had to DNF anything else.
Yeah.
You're gonna laugh. I have DNF'd a number of 100 Ks,
Okay.
but
That's
nothing
funny.
big.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah.
it is interesting, Corinne. Like attempting a Charlie Miller is always going to be hard, right? And
Mhm.
it's like you're on a razor's edge.
Mhm.
First of all, you experience that crash, which is kind of traumatic, isn't that right? Like
Uh,
suddenly
It
this
was
is not
very
as easy.
traumatic for
Yeah.
me. Yeah, I don't
And
like
then
blood.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then you get lost and then you see your friend who can't ride. Like all of those things are going to push you
Right.
very naturally into a DNF, I think.
Yeah.
Isn't that right? And
Yeah.
the rest is so random and yeah.
Well, and I was also feeling guilty. Like, I'm like, okay, so I know that I went off course, and so technically I'm probably a DQ, although I wasn't sure because so my first Super 600, I
Yeah.
went off I went off course because Eldora as far as I knew, was a ski resort. I didn't know that there was a town. So there's a
Yeah.
time where the roads split, and I went up to the ski resort because it's a
Yeah.
Super 600, and I didn't know that there was anything else called Eldora. So, and it was an out and back. So I actually did it twice. So
Amazing.
when John Lee submitted it to provincial randonneurs, they told
Yeah.
them this is what she did, and so I added
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
2,000 extra feet. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. And apparently,
Yeah.
I'm famous in RUSA for that screw up. So like, I'm like, I didn't know if I would be DTQ'd. I mean, I deserved it,
Cool.
but yeah.
Okay. And then just briefly, long term, we kind of talked about it, but you were disappointed, obviously, when you looked back on it as time passed. Is that
Um,
right?
so so in the midterm, yes, but like now that I've finished, now I'm fine with it. It's just part of my
Yes.
story.
Okay.
Um,
Cool. So
yeah.
then heading back then to 2023, you obviously want to correct the wrongs. Okay. Is that right?
Yes, but there's a very important piece of the story, and that's in 2022. I
Yeah.
went to Virginia to do the Treasure Cove 1200 because I was born in Virginia and I had never
Okay.
been there since we
Okay.
left when I was a year. And I met two people who play a role in 2023.
Okay.
Andre Florisu and Nick DeHaan.
Okay.
So Nick and I ended up being roommates because both of our travel partners had bailed on us, and we kind of hit it off. Nick's a super
Yeah.
nice guy. And Andre, we actually rode together, and he was impressed with me. I'm a little bit older than him. He was impressed with me and wanted to stay friends and wanted to ride. So 2023 comes around, and everybody's like, Corinne, you're going back to PBP. And no, no, nope, not going to do it.
Not a chance. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, my husband was not thrilled with the idea. He
Okay.
thinks he thinks I'm crazy. But Andre, long story short, Andre pretty much twisted my arm, and so I'm like, okay. But in 2023, I was not on a streak of like great performances and brevets and
Yeah.
other rides.
But
Yeah,
what was your intention to do Charlie Miller in 2023?
Yes. Andre's like, we can do it, and I'm like, I
Okay.
was skeptical. And then the biggest thing was he said, well, a couple people offered to be our support, but I turned them down. I'm like, no. I
Yeah.
said, I,
Yeah.
I said, no, we need the support. And I told him, because he had not done it, you burn time in the controls. No matter how good your intentions are, you
Yeah.
burn time. And I'm like, and for me, I told him food is difficult. Um, it Getting food that I can eat, and he had several conversations in the controls. He's fluent in French.
Yes.
He saved me from gluten a couple times. Yeah.
Cool.
So yes, the plan was to do Charlie Miller, but I did not have the confidence going in like I did.
Okay.
And then here's
D-
the
d-
logistics part of that.
can I
So
ask you one question about
sure.
that though? Like last time it was Charlie Miller or bust.
Yes.
This time it wasn't Charlie Miller or bust. It was
No.
basically or finish perhaps. Would that have been more
Right.
of your
It
okay?
was
All
it
right.
was here's plan A and here's plan
Okay.
B. And I
Cool.
was upfront with Andre about that. And he also had a plan A and a plan B, but this is part of the problem. His plan A and plan B were a little bit different than mine. So his
Yeah.
plan A was help Corinne Charlie Miller, and his plan B was Charlie Miller by myself.
Okay.
And yeah, my plan A was Charlie Miller and plan B was finish.
That's funny.
So, but again, I didn't have the confidence. And then getting there was so stressful because sitting on the tarmac in Denver for an hour, we're supposed to have taken off. They pull us off the plane and say there's a mechanical problem. We're going to have to rebook all of you. So when it was my turn to be rebooked, I said, I have a really big bike race. I said, please make sure that my bike gets onto the plane that you're sending me on. Instead of going to Chicago, they rerouted me to Frankfurt.
Okay.
And so they did get my bike. But in doing this, the girl helping me, she said, please tell me that your suitcase is not black. My suitcase is black.
Oh, no way.
So yeah, my bike and we made it to Charles de Gaulle, but my suitcase went to Chicago.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I had a bike, most of a bike. I didn't have skewers and I didn't have pedals. Um, United had made me take almost everything out of my bike case. So I had shoved my shoes, my helmet. I had like the most important things, but not everything. So the first thing we did when we got to France was to go out and we bought some flat pedals and some skewers from Decathlon. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is I wore a jumpsuit that it with like flat shoes. It could be stylish, but it looked like pajamas.
Okay.
Thank goodness I put a camisole on underneath.
Yeah, there you go. It's
So
France,
yeah,
huh?
and I didn't have like a backup outfit with me. You know, I had bike
Yeah.
stuff with me. So yeah, so and I bought a skirt so I could
Yes.
go out in public and not look like I was wearing my pajamas.
And
Um,
did the suitcase have to make it to
it
the
absolutely did.
there was
I
no way
didn't
you could
have
have okay.
lights, reflective
Okay.
gear, and
Yeah, that's
food.
really stressful. Oh my God, that's so
Yeah.
stressful.
Oh yeah, yeah, it was. But fortunately, my suitcase did arrive in time. So, yeah. So, but the most important thing in my suitcase was some prescription sleeping pills.
Okay, good.
And I have everybody that knows me knows that only with cycling I have a sleeping problem. I don't know why. I did my very first 1200K without sleeping the night before. I didn't sleep the first night or the second night, so 623 miles without sleep.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Um, yeah. So I had those prescription sleeping pills, and that night I slept 9.5 hours, which is absolutely amazing for me.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's wonderful.
We missed the photograph, the
Yeah.
RUSA photograph on the castle
Yeah.
grounds. I didn't care.
Okay.
But I woke up and I felt awesome. And
That's
Andre and I
wonderful.
talked through our plan, and I was completely on board.
Perfect.
I was like,
And were you,
we're
yeah,
going to do this.
were you in a fast group, A, B, C, one of those again?
Both 2019 and 2023, I was in group B,
Okay.
both
And
times.
you were ready for that fast start. Was it very similar again?
Yes. Yes. This time I was nervous,
Yeah.
but I was ready for the fast start. And there were actually a small group of us from Treasure Cove. So I had, and they were not the same level of cyclists that Billy and Mark were. And they were more like, my posse. So that was like helpful to have them with me. So I knew that I wasn't going to be deserted right away. Yeah. So it
That's
was a
great.
fast start. But I was nervous for the first 20 kilometers. And I'll tell you, when we rode past the scene of the accident,
Yeah.
that was for me even bigger relief than finally finishing. That was that was huge. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm over the big sticking point. And so I was able to relax, and
Yes.
I did not enjoy most of PvP in 2019. I started enjoying myself.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And in 2019, I didn't really get anything out of the all the people, standing on the side of the road cheering or clapping. I think I was like too serious and too
Okay.
into myself, and then feeling too bad. But I was able to also enjoy that in 2023.
Yeah.
So I was having a very, very different experience.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Can I make a guess here? I suspect the challenge for Charlie Miller this time was just the controls. Was that the reason?
Yep.
Was that the big difference?
Oh
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Yeah,
definitely. And like I said, a couple times Andre saved me. I was hoping that I would. I had a lot of food with me, but I could only carry so much on my bike. So and also had some in my drop bag. But I was hoping to be able to supplement with rice or potatoes in the controls for meals. Uh, that didn't really work out. Like
yeah. You
one
don't have
time,
time. You don't have time to go into the cafeteria if you're doing
right.
Charlie
So,
Miller.
well,
Yeah,
time was an issue. And also when we did, we said,
yeah.
because we said we brought food, we wolfed down dinner the first night. We said the first time we stop for food is going to be the second night. And I had hoped to be able to get potatoes, but the potatoes, they use flour. And so I couldn't eat
Okay.
them. But yeah, the control time, and Andre was shocked at how long it
Oh
took to get
yeah,
through. And I'm like, I told you so.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
again, I think I was more relaxed about it because I really realized that it was a long shot. Um,
Yes.
and yeah, it was okay. I mean, it didn't feel like, yeah, it didn't feel like, oh, I have to
I
ride
get you.
5640. It was like, okay, the first like 300 kilometers, we were on pace and everything was good. But then after that first, trying to get food that first night, then
Yeah.
we started looking at each other like, I don't know if this is going to happen. But anyway, so,
Yes.
so my happy story from
Yes.
2023 was coming into Carhay. So, the second day, and I walked in to get my card stamped. And the woman who stamped my card, she said to me, "Can you believe it? The first rider has already returned." And I said, "What's his name?" And she's like, I said, "Can you tell me what country he came from?" And she's like,
Yes.
I will look it up. And so she looked it up, and she takes the phone, she turns it to me, and she says, "Nick DeHaan." And I went, "Woo!"
That's
And I'm not a
amazing.
really like
Yeah.
emotive person, and I tumbled out, "Mon ami, je suis très heureux." That was like so exciting for me that
That's
Nick
great.
was doing so well. And I just, I rode that wave of elation all the way into Brest. That was,
That's so cool.
that
Yeah.
was, yeah, that was super fun. Just knowing
That's
that he was out there.
yeah. Getting back to Andre because he fascinates me. So he had plan A, plan B. When did you guys start realizing that your respective plans may not work?
In Ludiac, when we are at 400K, um, and so what he should have done is drop me.
Yeah.
He was fast enough to ride and get through the controls, and he can eat anything. But although he would have run into trouble down the road, but yeah, so Ludiac the first time through, and then when we got to Brest, we were like, okay, you know what, Charlie Miller's not going to happen, and Andre said, I if I really wanted to do that, I should have dropped you already. He's like, but we're gonna ride together, and we're both fine with it. We're gonna ride
Yeah.
together, and we're just gonna enjoy the rest of the ride. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so
Yeah.
so
It's
leaving
yeah.
Ludiac, I mean, sorry, leaving Brest, we actually he needed to sleep, so we actually I'm like, okay, yeah, we can stop. I knew I wouldn't sleep, but we were
Yeah.
both okay. So we shifted to plan B. And we had a series of different time goals. And I think our first one was probably, okay, we can't do Charlie Miller, but we can do under 60 hours.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that was the first change. And we were both happy about Nick. Like that
Oh yeah.
really, that
Yeah.
that kind of made the ride
Yeah.
for us.
I,
And
I, I I think it's interesting, Corinne, because once you ride with someone else, right, you need to communicate your goals and
mhm.
figure out, because it's tough to leave people, even
Yep.
though you might have one. So it's such a hard thing, isn't it, to really
Oh,
communicate correctly? Yeah.
oh, it definitely is, and Andre and I didn't know each other that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I'm not gonna say that it was all smooth sailing, but
No. No.
we probably had our moments, but uh, for whatever reason, he decided, okay, yeah, you know what, the most important thing is that we're going to stay together, and we'll do our best. And this was his second, yeah, this was his second 1200K.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so I had a little bit more experience than him, which
Completely. Yeah.
yeah came into play later. But yeah, so we decided to stay together. And the funny thing about the whole ride was, so Andre speaks French, and he was very social and outgoing. And we would get into these pace lines, and he would be chatting with each person, and work his way up the pace line, and he'd get to the front, and then he'd throw the hammer down, blow the pace line up, and I would be the first person shot out the back. So this happened over and over and over. But
Yeah.
he was having a great time.
Yeah.
And and I was like, always, I was always with a bunch, and I speak a smattering of French, but I
Oh,
know from LEL that my French is not good enough, like while I'm riding a bike, to try to have a conversation with somebody. Yeah.
completely. Yeah. That's hard. So then you get maybe, unless there's anything else. So once you get to the finish line, how did that
Mm.
feel? And can I just
No,
say, I have, yeah,
the
go ahead.
most important part. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah.
Um, we we split up right before. I don't remember which town. Let me see. So, we split up right before Drew because he
Okay.
needed a nap. And I
Okay.
said, he's like, I don't want to leave you. I don't want to leave you. Like, you need sleep. And I'm like, I need to keep moving. You need sleep. I said, don't worry, you're gonna catch me. And so I said, I'll see you in the Drew control. And that was actually fun for me because I fell in with a group of 4 Brits,
Yeah.
and yay, I got to speak English, and
Yeah.
and have some of the social interaction that, for me, the whole point of going and doing any kind of organized ride is to meet people.
That's
Um,
cool.
so anyway, so we get to the Drew control, and I stop and we have a snack. I just had a Coke, and I go outside because they're going to leave. I'm like sad, but just then Andre rolls in, and he's like, "Wait for me." I'm like, "Okay, I'm waiting for you." And actually, the guys did too. So Andre runs in, fills up his bottles, comes out, and then so the 6 of us were rolling out, and I don't know what happened. I roll out of the control, I hear a noise, and the next thing I know, I'm sitting on the ground, and somebody said, "Get an ambulance." And
Oh
I
my
said,
God, really?
"No ambulance." So I crashed, and
Wow.
I don't know what happened.
Okay. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I really spooked Andre because he had been with a friend earlier that year who had crashed and just was completely full of blood. For me, there was like nothing, but it was too late. There was an ambulance and 6 EMTs, and none of them spoke English.
Yes.
Thank goodness, again, I had Andre with me.
Yeah.
So I'm in the in the ambulance, and they're like, "Okay, we don't see anything wrong. Her vitals are fine." And Andre's
Yeah.
translating and everything, and they they said, you know, either you come with us to the hospital for an MRI, or you can finish the ride. He's like, "But you don't have time to do both." And I looked
Yes.
at Andre, and I'm like, "I want to get out." So I got out of the ambulance, but I sat down because I'm like, wow, okay, this is pretty serious. Um, am I irresponsible? Am
Yeah.
I injured somehow? And we sat there for about 2 hours,
Yes.
and I wanted to talk to somebody who speaks English, uh, who knew, something about head injuries. And so I tried texting my friend Mark, who's a medical professional, and I looked, I'm like, yeah, he'll be at the hospital back home. He didn't answer. So I'm like, I'm going to text Nick. I knew Nick would be done. And Nick is a nurse. So I texted Nick. He answered me immediately. And he said, well, as a healthcare professional, I think you should go to the hospital. He said, as an endurance rider, I totally understand if you get back on your bike. And I just needed that one tiny little bit of
Completely.
validation. So yeah, so thanks to Andre and to Nick, I finished the ride.
Amazing, Corinne.
Yeah.
Like it just shows you can never relax on PBP. Isn't that right? Like that was basically your, it was almost like a lap of honor. You were getting to the finish and then suddenly you don't even know what
30
happened.
miles away and eight
Amazing.
years. And
Yes.
and so I had, I'm like, if I quit, there's no way my husband would ever let me yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you had quite a journey, isn't that right? Like a
Mhm.
DNS, a DNF,
Yeah.
and you finished
Yeah.
despite an ambulance visit.
Right.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
crazy. Cool. So true. Cool. Okay, so then the $1 million question, are you going to do PBP again?
I honestly I don't know.
Okay.
All the stars would have to align.
Okay.
Because if I go, it's it will be to try and set a PR. Because
Okay.
to me, like PvP, like that's when you're supposed to that's your A game. You're for me, I'm not going just to finish. I know I can finish a 1200K. I
Yeah.
want to go to knock it out of the park. So I
Yes.
would I would need a riding partner. I would need support because of my food problems.
Yeah.
I need to not be sick. I need
Yes.
to not crash.
Okay. Yeah.
And randonneering's getting harder for me. So
Yeah.
maybe we'll see.
Great. Okay, so we're going to end with your three tips, and you
Mhm.
have amazing experience, okay, since you've qualified three times. And this guarantees a finish for anyone that follows your tips, Corinne. No
Okay,
pressure.
so this first one's going to sound stupid. It's going to sound a little bit glib, but I've looked at some of your other interviews, and nobody says my first one is don't crash. And and I mean some specific things by that. With PvP, you're going to be in a big group of people, all mixture of abilities, and some people without pack riding skills. So if you feel like you're in a situation that isn't safe, extricate yourself from that. If you know you need sleep, and that you can get squirrely on the bike without it, then take the extra time and sleep. But if you crash, if you're involved in any kind of, crash, you're going to greatly reduce your chances of finishing. And I've
Yes.
had two experiences, and I wouldn't recommend that. So
Yeah.
you have to just be more aware, situationally aware, and also there's more road furniture over in Europe than we have here in the States. And so, yeah, you have to keep your eyes and ears open, and yeah, stay alert. So yeah, don't
Se-
crash.
Seems like an excellent tip number one. I'm not glib at all. Yeah.
Okay, so my second tip is aimed at people who have dietary restrictions. And so I've got celiac. It could be, if you're lactose intolerant. I have a friend who is vegan and ran into problems. You need to cover your bases with food. Don't rely on the controls for for your meals. Maybe for snacks, you can get fruit there if you have time to peel a banana. You can get soda, but bring your food, whether it's on your bike, whether it's in your drop bag. If you have support, you need to be able to feed yourself. Yeah, and for me, liquid calories don't work. I need to have actual food, so it is hard. But yeah, again, you'll increase your chances of finishing if you know that you have what you need to get through the whole 1200K. And then my third tip would be have a plan. I really think it helps to have a plan, but have a backup plan as well. There are so many things that can go wrong. You could get separated from your riding partner. There can be terrible weather. And for me, in 2019, I literally never thought of a plan B. It was just Charly Miller. And so when that started to, when it become unlikely, you can't, after you've been awake for 50 hours, you can't start to, to plan something then. You need to do it ahead of time. So planning is really important. And those would be my 3 tips.
Corinne, excellent tips. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to meet you. I learned a lot. Okay. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.